Previously on Podcast Without Pretense.
You know what I like? Stability. Nothing ever changes. Everything's always the same.
Okay, that's the last episode where I drink red wine during it. I promise.
It's a good thing we chose just not to publish that one. It should never see the light of day.
So, hi, I'm Jonathan Strickland.
Hi, I'm Ayaz Akhtar.
And I'm Eric Sandine.
And together, we form a ultra-elite unit of soldiers who are the only line of defense against the evil Cobra organization.
Yeah,
Go
we're
Joe.
the PW Pose.
Something along those. We're the fashion dolls. We're Gem and the holograms.
We're the non-action figures. So we're not articulate. We can't be articulated, excuse me. And we're not. I'm not articulate anyway, so that's a whole other issue.
I think we're both. We're both inarticulate and unarticulated. I think is what it is. Our elbows don't actually bend. You know, if you try and move our legs, they break right off at the hip. It's kind of how we roll.
They're like our will. They don't bend. I don't know.
So welcome to yet another episode of the award-winning podcast, future award-winning podcast Without Pretense. So guys, some crazy stuff happened to me since the last time we recorded, and not just to me, but to all of my coworkers. Did you guys hear that crazy story?
You guys all watched G.I. Joe Retaliation together?
No, that's not the that would have been crazy, especially if we had all sat through it. But no, I work for HowStuffWorks.com, which Discovery is selling to a company called Blue Cora. So I will no longer be a Discovery employee once that sale is final.
So does that mean once that sale is final that you can actually give us your opinion on Discovery matters?
Probably not, for reasons I can't discuss.
Well, that seems about right. Yeah.
I can't talk about it. There's one thing that will hold me back. Yeah.
I'm going to keep talking about Blue Cora right now because I have no affiliation with them. I have really nothing to say about Blue Cora. I'm sure they're a fantastic place.
I'm very excited about the direction of the company. It looks to me like we're going to see some big movement, in support of the website and the various stuff brands. So I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Wait,
so it's
does Blue Cora own Monoprice?
Yes.
Wow.
You are into the greatest stocking stuffers of all time. Just here's some HDMI switchers and HDMI cables for everyone. Ever.
Yeah. Well, no, never mind. Too many jokes. I'm not going to go in. But at any rate, it's been that kind of week where we've all been kind of surprised by the news and then kind of letting it sink in and getting to know the new folks and learning about the transition and all that kind of stuff. So obviously I can't talk too much about it because it's still a deal that's going through, and I've still work for Discovery until that's done and all that kind of stuff. But it's I'd say that the feeling in the office for people who really are big fans of the stuff brands and are worried, don't worry. There's no reason to worry. So that's it. Big news, though, for us. So anything big happened to you guys? I know, Ayaz, didn't you recently announce a plan of relocation?
Yes. So now it's without issue, I could simply say to everybody, I'm moving to New York in June. I'm dragging Liz with me and my dogs, and I am going to be virtually touring apartments tomorrow, actually, because I'm like, I can't keep flying out. I was in New York to check out apartments, and this time there really wasn't a heck of a lot of inventory, but there's some stuff I'm looking at tomorrow and maybe in May if I have to go out again. But mid-June or late June, that is, I'm going to be New York bound, which means I have to sell all my stuff because I'm not bringing any of this shit with me because this stuff is heavy and it's expensive to move it across country. I've done that once already. I'm not doing it again. So pretty much everything you're seeing behind me, there's a good chance I'm taking none of it. Actually, yeah,
Can't
pretty
really
much.
make out anything else in the room, or I'd call dibs. Ooh, the step stool. Can I have that step stool?
Well, I got this Eames chair that I need to get rid of, which is pretty
good Lord,
pricey.
You're getting rid of the Eaves chair? I remember when you bought that.
You know, when I bought that chair,
it was a big deal.
It was a big deal not only because it's ridiculously overpriced, but the idea was I finally could buy this chair because I would never have to move again. I shit you not. That is why I bought that chair. I'm like, this is it. I put it in this corner. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be at my job forever. I'm going to be doing this stuff. I'm very happy. So I bought that chair. And when this place was painted gray, because this is all this other color, when this place was painted gray, this was the only thing in the room at that time. It was the last thing. I mean, it was the first thing that was in here. And then I moved it. It's been moved out of here and back in here. So this has been a real tumultuous time. So, chair, as lovely as you are, you will be probably loved by somebody else at some point because it probably will fund part of the move. Because it's still, yeah, exactly. So there's really no point in that. And the next place I have will probably be about the size of a mouse pad, which is fine because that means my commute will be tiny. Because I hate long commutes. Right now I have an hour-and-a-half commute. That's how I watch movies for this show. And I can't wait to have a commute that's under an hour because I think that's how it's going to be when I finally land in New York City, in the Queensboro, not exactly in the Manhattan area like I'd like, until my dogs are either accepted as small dogs, 50 pounds, I know that's too big. Just today I saw like a freaking Great Dane that was like 4 feet tall when it was sitting down. So I'm like, well, if they only knew what a large dog looked like, they would not think my dog is large. But anyway, that's what's happening. Those are the big things. Eric, you recently announced that you decided to change your job, right?
Yes. I have no idea what you're referring to.
It's when you made the big announcement that you were going to go on tour with One Direction as a new vocalist.
Oh, right. Well, the plans kind of fell through. We didn't really see eye to eye.
Are this because they're so short?
Mainly, yeah.
Okay.
They're
all
tiny,
right. Well,
they're tiny, tiny people.
Sometimes this happens. Yeah. The plans of mice and men do have to go agley. So I guess now we move on to what is going to be the real meat of discussion in this podcast. Now that we've got the trivialities out of the way, of course, on Podcast Without Pretense, the thing we are famous for, really world renowned when it comes down to it. I mean, that's what got our faces carved on the side of that mountain. Is the fact that we like to watch really shitty movies. Actually, I should amend that. We don't like to watch really shitty movies.
We
put ourselves through watching really shitty movies from time to time.
This is true. So the whole idea, for those who have never heard us talk about this before, is that we wanted to test our ability to focus our attention, because we all notice that as we tend to watch stuff at home, we also tend to have a second, third, fourth screen open and available near us, and maybe we're drinking, maybe we're talking to someone else. Point is, we're not dedicating our full attention to whatever's on the screen. And so thus, when we try and have conversations about it later, we leave out big chunks because we just weren't paying attention. So we wanted to test our ability to see if we still could pay attention by picking some of the worst movies, at least according to predictions on Netflix, and then how long can we go watching those movies before we give up and open up a second screen or otherwise invite distractions into the environment. And the film this week, oh, by the way, and after we do give up, you can either continue watching the movie with the distractions, you just have to note how long you watched before you did it, or you can just walk away. If you're sane, you just walk away. We're clearly not sane, because I think all of us nearly always finish the movie. This week, the movie, I picked it, so I'll go ahead and take responsibility, is G.I. Joe Retaliation, which of course is the sequel / reboot of G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra. So before we talk about the quality of the movie, what we thought about it, I have a ton of notes. I have to ask you guys, how far into the movie did you get before the first distraction / opening up a second screen? Eric?
I made it about 25 minutes, and that's because I forgot what I was doing. Like, I was sitting there watching the movie and then picked up my phone and started reading the news and then just kind of realized, oh, right, yeah.
Right. I can see what that... I'm not even going to blame you, Eric.
It was just during some long action scene. I was just like, oh, yeah, well... What?
Yeah. All right. Ayaz, what about you?
I made it 19 minutes before I decided to open up a second screen, and I didn't mind actually having a second screen going from that point on, because I'm sure we'll talk about this with Jonathan's notes, and we'll pepper in our commentary as we go.
I got 33 minutes in without, and I mean I had like all the lights turned off. It was just me, the movie. 33 minutes. And even then, I felt like I had gone too long. Like I should have opened up a second screen earlier. I felt like I had been punishing myself. And it's not that the movie is god-awful the way some of the other movies we've watched on this show are god-awful. It was just, despite lots of shit happening, was incredibly boring to me. And yeah. I think the main reason it was boring to me is because I did not give one flying fuck about any of the characters. At all.
I mean, as opposed to lots of our other movies, this one didn't make me hate any specific section of humanity, which is a plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was also just kind of boring through most of it. Just bored.
Well, yeah, maybe I didn't find it as boring because I was on a bus ride. I was taking the bus back home today. I was watching G.I. Joe. I'm like, hey, this is slightly amusing. And as the signal on T-Mobile would drop out, it would freeze for like a minute or two. So maybe I was spared the boredom because I was forced to take breaks between these ridiculously long action sequences. And I will admit, I did enjoy several of them because they were just really over the top. But you guys, I guess you're right. If you were just, if I wasn't on the bus, I could literally just turn my head and see, the nice countryscape go by me. Or when I'm in the city, see that other thing. So we don't count those as distractions. Looking up, it's not the same thing. But
right.
I don't know. That's a technicality.
I'd also say that you benefited from the fact that you had haptic feedback because you were on a moving bus. So it'd be kind of like going to one of those super fancy theaters with the speakers in the seats. Well, let me ask you guys this before we get into the discussion of the film itself, because this also is important. Are either of you at all a fan of G.I. Joe in any of its incarnations? Whether it was you collected the toys, you were a big fan of the cartoons, and have you seen the first movie, Rise of the Cobra?
So I saw the first movie, and I don't remember it at all. I think I watched it right when it came out. I don't remember anything from it. I did watch the shows, but that's when I was little, so I don't particularly remember them either. And I had some of the toys. So, but then again, I couldn't tell you any of the plot lines from any of the, the previous movie or any of the original cartoons. So.
Okay, I watched the previous movie, and I remembered, the only thing I remember about the movie is that it had a lot of nonsensical plot twists that were going on. It felt like watching the result of a child playing with toys and go, oh, I'm a good guy now. Oh, watch this. I'm going to try to steal this device. Oh, I'm going to do this other thing now. I'm a bad guy now. Look at this. And that's what it felt like. So I thought that was a little bit nuts. And the cartoon show was a little bit more straightforward. I think Retaliation resembles more like the cartoon show, where it was pretty straightforward, couple of plot twists, but nowhere near as bad as the first one.
Wow. See, I think that this... Granted, it's been a long time since I've seen Rise of the Cobra. I did see it. Was not a fan of the cartoons at all. Didn't care for them. Never collected the toys. Really was only kind of tangentially aware of G.I. Joe because since I was never into it as a kid, I never really bothered to look into it. The most G.I. Joe I ever watched were all the redubbed PSAs that came out years ago. I'm a computer. Those pork chop sandwiches. But so I don't remember hating Rise of the Cobra as much as I hated G.I. Joe Retaliation. I actually felt that Retaliation was somewhat incoherent, mostly because it was weaving together multiple plots and it wasn't doing it in a very, it was not seamless. And the editing was terrible, where you felt like certain scenes just didn't even flow from one to the next. And or you couldn't get a good sense of time or location for a lot of them. So I actually felt that this one was not as good a movie as the first one. Not to say the first one was good, but it was ludicrous and kind of silly and fun. The ludicrous stuff in the second one just was dumb to me. Anyway, so this movie also is difficult because it is both a sequel and a reboot. And that means that it follows the first film, but it also disregards the first film a lot. So the position that our characters are in at the beginning, at the opening of Retaliation, is dependent upon the first film, but tons of characters from the first film are never seen or referred to at all in Retaliation. Like almost all the G.I. Joes. Almost all of those characters are neither seen nor referred to. With the exception of Snake Eyes and Duke until he dies. Spoiler alert. There will be spoilers in this. I don't know if you can call them spoilers, but yeah.
If it's on Netflix, it's really open game.
The movie's a year old.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, Duke, who was he was a major character in the first movie in Rise of the Cobra. Ends up dying within the first 20 minutes of G.I. Joe Retaliation. Thus, the whole name, Cobra's retaliating against G.I. Joe, and then G.I. Joe has to retaliate against Cobra. And at the end of Rise of the Cobra, you have Zartan, the guy who can disguise himself as other people. He's disguised as the President of the United States at the end of the first movie. So it picks up where he's still disguised as the president. Cobra Commander and Destro have been captured, so they're in a secret prison in Germany. I guess we have some sort of jurisdiction or something where America can operate a prison in Germany, and that's okay.
Wait 1 second. So they there's the base, or at least I guess the entrance to this prison, secret prison in Germany, and then apparently there's an elevator that takes them into an international territory, which that really isn't explained, because as far as I know, the boundaries of borders, they go like pretty much into the core of the earth and to that, like, into heaven. That's like basic, something that's written into like contracts that way. So unless the elevator went down and maybe to the left and went into some kind of international waters, which would be really impressive considering how quick this ride is. I think they're supposed to. They really are in Germany. Again, I don't know how it works. Maybe 70 feet down, it's not Germany. It's something else like No Man's Land.
As you didn't notice that it was the Wonka Vader they got in.
See, I thought the camera work would have confused. Maybe the camera just moved so smoothly that when they went sideways, I didn't catch that.
You just didn't notice that all of Cobra's, all of the prison's guards were Oompa Loompas. You just didn't. It's probably because you're on the bus. Anyway, so that's where we start off, right? You got Cobra Commander and Destro who are in prison. You've got Zartan, who's the president. You've got the Joes who are in Egypt at the pit, which is their base of operations. And they're going on various missions. In fact, it opens with them on a mission, and then there's a second mission, and that's the one where Duke gets killed. The only Joes who survive after... so Zartan, as the president, calls in an airstrike against the Joes, claiming that the Joes had gone rogue and had assassinated Pakistan's president, I think. And apparently that gave the president the authority to call an airstrike and wipe out the Joes without any attempt to actually capture and try them in a court of law.
Well, it was that, and they had stolen the nuclear warheads That was the idea. Like they would become, they were trying to take over the world or something, and the U.S. had to act fast.
Yeah.
That was
he also names Cobra as his new security command, which is kind of weird because I could have sworn that the whole Cobra thing had come out of Rise of the Cobra, and that perhaps people would be a little hesitant. But anyway, so the Joes are all wiped out, save for Roadkill.
Roadblock.
Not Roadblock, not Roadkill. I'm thinking Transformers.
A lot of them are Roadkill.
Yeah, Roadblock. Yeah, no, almost all of them are Roadkill. Roadblock, Lady J, and Flint? That's the other one? And
Flint
Snake Eyes, because Snake Eyes wasn't there. Snake Eyes is on a mission somewhere else, or he's just on his own for some reason, and it's never explained in the movie why he's not with everybody else. He's just not there, and they're cool with that. If Snake Eyes isn't here, it's for a reason. Oh, well, thank you, exposition. So all the Joes are wiped out, and then the whole plot of the movie is that the Joes, now that they have been stripped of their status as this elite team, they are now hunted, they're wanted, most of them are presumed dead. They have to figure out what's going on. They have to uncover the fact that Zartan is posing as the president and trying to free Cobra Commander, and they have to stop whatever the new plan is for world domination, which, by the way, actually sounds like it was a better plan than the plan in the first movie, and it's kind of hinted that the whole plan of the second movie is predicated on what happened in the first movie. It makes no sense. So here are my notes. First of all, I have to say, and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, I posted on Facebook, I think that this movie might be the second worst film we've watched from a budget to quality ratio consideration, because the budget for this was $130 million, estimated $130 million, and this is what we got. I would say that the worst movie we've watched from a budget to quality ratio is Transformers Dark of the Moon, because that was a $195 million movie, and I think it was worse than this one. Do you guys think that's a fair assumption?
I'm pondering the movies we've watched. I think it's fair because it's the most. I think it is the most expensive movie, right? You just said that 130 over 105.
Well, yeah, Transformers is the most expensive at 195. Okay. But G.I. Joe, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But I don't think there's another movie that comes close to it from a budget to quality ratio. We've seen worse movies. Rock and Roll Frankenstein still stands tall, defiantly proud as the worst movie we've watched, as far as I'm concerned. But the budget, I'm sure, didn't come close to $130 million.
I don't know. The budget for The Adventures of Thunderstorm looked pretty freaking high. That looked like it was upwards of like $200, $300.
But The Adventures of Thunderstorm was somewhere in quality between Iron Man 2 and 3.
Oh, wow. So if you haven't watched Adventures of Thunderstorm, on Netflix, I highly recommend it. With your finger on the fast forward button, because that is a phenomenally low budget, horrifically bad, poorly acted, shitty audio. There's like, is there any redeeming function, any redeeming factor in that entire movie?
As I recall, that movie has the longest establishing shots on any movie ever. It establishes the same chain link fence like 6 times to indicate when they're at the one area where the laboratory is, as I recall. And so every time it cuts back to the laboratory, before it goes inside the laboratory, just so it doesn't confuse us, we get an establishing shot of a chain link fence with a sign on it outside that lasts for a good like 20 or 30 seconds. Way longer than you ever need to establish where you are. Oh, good times. I miss that movie when I watch things like G.I. Joe Retaliation. All right, so here are my notes. And I'll go slowly so you guys can chime in if you feel the need. So here's what the first thing I wrote was, okay, seriously, what the fuck was this movie about? So it felt like a mass of incoherent storylines that had been smushed together to make a movie. I had to read the synopsis for the first film to remind me of what happened in it, but that really wasn't necessary because there's so little connection between the two films. I mentioned that Cobra Commander and Destro had been captured. Zartan had assumed the identity of the president. So in the second film, we're missing a hell of a lot of characters because there's no Hawk, there's no Scarlet, there's no Breaker, there's no Ripcord, there's no Heavy Duty, there's no Baroness. Instead, we've got Roadblock, Lady J, Mouse Flint, and a couple of other characters. So I figured out there were three main plots going on in this movie. Plot number one is the idea that the Zartan has to bust out Cobra Commander from prison so that the Cobra Commander can resume his quest for world domination. In plot number two, we have Zartan's plan to destroy G.I. Joe by blaming them with no actual evidence or trial for a military attack and then ordering a strike on them. And then in plot number three, we have Snake Eyes and Jinx, which is Storm Shadow's cousin. Storm Shadow's the evil ninja. Snake Eyes is the good ninja. But they big twist. Snake Eyes, of course, wears black, and Storm Shadow wears white. So that's how.
Brilliant.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the third plot, is that Snake Eyes and Jinx are trying to capture Storm Shadow. And I said, because so few of the characters from the first film carry over into the second, and Duke dies within the first 20 minutes of the film, killing off one of the few characters bridging the two films, you don't care about any of this. And it's so incoherent and edited in such a terrible way, it makes no sense. Specific things that make no sense. So Zartan is posed as president, and he ends up torturing the real president to find out where Cobra Commander is being held. But he's posing as president, and everyone believes he's the president. So why doesn't he just fucking ask someone, hey, where did we stow that Cobra Commander guy? Literally, he could ask, are they suggesting that the president is the only person in the United States who knows where Cobra Commander is? I just thought that was totally ridiculous. Like, why would you need to torture the president? The prison is in Germany, but seems to have an American warden and crew. We don't see the president reveal the location of Cobra Commander, and it seems like they figured out where the prison was without him by smuggling Storm Shadow into the prison. So yeah, Storm Shadow is captured. He's disguised as Snake Eyes, who has supposedly assassinated the president of Pakistan. That whole part of the storyline never cleared up, by the way. So he's brought in. What?
I thought the reason why they implicated, at least the Zartan as president implicates Snake Eyes as the assassin. It was like a plan B, so they could get Snake Eyes arrested, Snake Eyes who was being portrayed by Storm Shadow, and brought to the same location on the assumption that they would be brought to the same place where the two Cobra leaders would be.
Which is really odd. I mean, out of all the different places to stow him, putting him in that same jail just didn't make any sense to me either. But anyway, so they bring Storm Shadow in. They actually demask Snake Eyes and find out that it's actually Storm Shadow in disguise underneath. And the guy's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just put you in here instead. And I'm thinking, wow, due process. Yay. like you are clearly not the guy we were going to put into this prison, but that just sucks to be you then, dude, because here you go. And then they put him in there, and then Storm Shadow manages to essentially fake a heart attack and then bust out of... He's essentially in a Bacta tank from Star Wars. It's just what it looks like. These tanks of fluid that the various people are suspended in, and they're supposed to be pumped full of a drug that keeps them in a kind of waking dream state where they can't move or anything, but they're fully aware of everything that's going on.
The whole setup for that was really annoying because it was about, I don't know, that the scene entering the prison, et cetera, was probably about 10 minutes long. And after he's in the tube, we spend about 5 minutes there. Like, I was just kind of pissed off that we spent so much time setting up that scene.
Well, also, the warden comes across as a sadistic asshole. Like, you're getting to a point where you're thinking, are there any good guys in this movie? Right. Because everyone seems like a completely unethical maniac. And so again, there's no emotional attachment here. You kind of want the bad guys to escape because the warden's such a dick. But
is there
all right,
any
so,
reason they have to be? Is there any? So I gotta ask more logical questions here. Is there any
Okay.
reason why they have to be in a tube suspended? If they're going to be paralyzed and they're going to be, they can actually see what's going on. They're trapped within their own bodies, and they can breathe. Can't they just be in beds? Why are they in tubes?
Well, then they'd get bed sores. So you got to get them so that they
That
don't
would be
get bed
cruel.
sores. Yeah.
And unusual.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense.
Okay, I was
So
just, I'm like, there must, maybe I missed it, but no, I didn't.
No, it makes no sense. Storm Shadow breaks out to great personal danger. Obviously, he breaks out of this thing. He throws some stuff around. I guess at first I thought they were supposed to be shurikens, but I guess it's supposed to just be pieces of glass from the tank, because otherwise you would assume that they would have, disarmed him before putting him in the tank. That would normally be protocol, I would imagine, for putting a super soldier into a prison. Also, I thought it was weird that why didn't he just break loose with the ass kicking before being put in the tank in the first place? That whole thing seemed kind of superfluous that he got put in the tank. He frees Cobra Commander, and Cobra Commander, as he's leaving, looks to... this is where Cobra Commander puts on a mask that he needs to help him breathe, and essentially kind of assumes the look of Cobra Commander for realsies. And he looks at Destro, who's still in his tank and can't move, and essentially says, "We're kicking you out of the band," which also makes no sense to me, because at the end of Rise of the Cobra, McCullen, the character who becomes Destro, is badly burned, and then Cobra Commander puts these like nanobots on his face, which heal his face, but then give him that metallic appearance. But it also puts him under Cobra Commander's power, so that Cobra Commander can command him to do whatever, and he'll do it. So if you've got a loyal, by design, brilliant arms dealer type character, why would you not go ahead and free him? After all, he's already under your power. So that made no sense.
In fairness, he's been suspended in this tube for like a year or two, and maybe Cobra Commander isn't exactly with it. Maybe he forgot he did that. Maybe he thought he dreamt it. This is the craziest thing. I can't believe I'm defending this movie as much as I am right now. Just looking for logic in this film. Maybe I thought it was much more like the cartoon show, so it just seemed to follow cartoon logic of stupidity.
Well, there's no logic. Calling it logic at all is a problem, because it's really, I mean, I guess if you're stepping outside of the reasons within the film, you could say you don't want to have too many bad guys in this one movie, but within the movie logic itself, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just like, just cause, that's the reason. And then beyond that, you've got the next line I have is, where the fuck did all the G.I. Joe guys go? Like, were all the other G.I. Joes killed? Like, all the ones that were in the first movie, were they in the pit and died in that attack? We don't know, because none of them are ever referred to by name. None of the ones that were in the first film, besides Duke and Snake Eyes, were referred to by name. So we don't know if they're dead or not. It seems like they are, which means G.I. Joe's been reduced to 3 members. It's kind of pathetic. Let's see. And then where the fuck was Snake Eyes when the Joes go on a mission? Didn't that need to be addressed somehow? And who the hell was in charge of putting the fake the fake beard? Oh, here we go. Who the hell was in charge of putting the fake beard on RZA as the martial arts master? Because that shit looked awful.
Oh God, yes, that was hilarious.
He played the blind martial arts master who trains all the ninja, the same ninja that that both Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow belong to, and that beard was like the worst looking fake beard in recent memory that I've seen. So it just looked terrible. And I'm thinking, this is a movie that had a $130 million budget. They didn't have any money to spend on fake facial hair. It was terrible.
Did he seem old enough to be in any authority position in that training area? It just seemed like, okay, we got some guy, We're gonna put some really bad makeup on him. The captions say his name is Blind Master, which was very helpful to me because I wasn't really paying attention and my resolution was getting really low on the bus. So maybe I didn't see the beard as horribly as I should have throughout the scenes because he's in multiple ones. His acting is of what kind of quality would you call it?
Non-existent.
I was gonna say poor, but yes, his acting not so good. I'm almost wondering if in theory, when they were shooting this, they were like, you know what, we don't need to put good makeup on him. We're just gonna cut him out. We're not gonna even need him in the movie because you don't really even need him necessarily. He's just like he's Mr. Exposition.
Yeah. I left out a lot of stuff after this point, but then there's a Snake Eyes Storm Shadow fight, and I have, how is it that Snake Eyes shoots the shurikens out of the air? So Storm Shadow throws throwing stars at Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes uses his automatic machine pistol to shoot the shurikens out of the air, yet the bullets don't go on to completely perforate Storm Shadow. Because it's a direct line, right? So Storm Shadow's just throwing stars down a hallway, and Snake Eyes is using a gun to shoot the stars out of the air, but the bullets don't keep on going to just rip into Storm Shadow and tear him to shreds. I guess the bullets just magically stop once they hit the stars. Perhaps Storm Shadow is actually throwing the stars with enough force to counteract the momentum of the bullets, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's you're right so far. And the other thing is he's Storm Shadow is actually advancing on Snake Eyes as he's doing this. So the throw should be there should be a lot less distance, and so they shouldn't have the same amount of force. So the bullets should at some point go by. But yeah, that's right. Physics on G.I. Joe 2, not exactly there.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't get too picky. So then I have the ninja fight on the side of the mountain made no goddamn sense, as it was clearly meant to be thrilling, but it was really just laughable to me with all the ninjas swinging around. Like, again, you couldn't get any sense of geography of what was going on. Like, where the hell are they trying to get to? Why are there some lines that are already set up? Like they had a really specific plan of how they were going to get Storm Shadow's body from the top of that mountain to the bottom, and thank goodness it all worked out just right, because if it hadn't, they would have been SOL, because they had the lady, or no, I'm sorry, Jinx and Snake Eyes had ropes set up where they had to land at very specific points, which seemed really odd considering all the back and forth swinging they had to do and fighting they had to do, that they still ended up at just where they needed to keep descending the mountains. Meanwhile, all the ninja have fucking grappling hooks that they can use at any time, despite the fact that they're all fucking hopeless. They're very much like the ninja in the comic book series The Tick, which would occasionally just fall out of the sky and land in a crumpled heap 4 feet to the Tick's left or right. So
okay, I got a kick out of that mountain scene only because it was so incredibly ridiculous. Before we even get to that chase scene, they're trying to go get Storm Shadow, they're trying to capture him alive because that's the mission. They get information from Storm Shadow, and they carefully rappel down. But they don't do it really quietly because Snake Eyes and Jinx decide to let people get thrown past the windows, which I think is a real bad way to blow your cover. But whatever, you're ninjas, so blow your cover all you want. And then eventually when they get to the mountain fight, like the first thing made sense. They're rappelling, they move over to the next one. But it's when... Actually, excuse me, I completely missed something. When Snake Eyes decides to chuck Storm Shadow, I didn't know there was a rope there. I was like, he just threw him off this thing. And so Storm Shadow's on his own predetermined path throughout this whole fight. And this fight goes on for it must be literally 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute sequence. And the whole time, Storm Shadow, I think at minute 8, finally stops in a location. It was so ridiculously over the top that I just couldn't criticize it. Like, this is just incredibly stupid. And this is amusing. This is the cartoon show.
it was funny that Snake Eyes was able to swing over and stop Storm Shadow's body from slamming into the side of the mountain just before it was going to, because it had been going down that rope for the last 8 minutes. So
he just also he just catches it like it's a little like a pillow, and he's like, okay, like there's no momentum transfer to Snake Eyes. It's just
right.
Okay.
Well, I also thought it was funny that but I left this part out, but it struck me as funny as I was watching it. Blind Master gives Snake Eyes the sword and says, "Capture Storm Shadow. Use this." I'm thinking, you want Storm Shadow alive, so you give Snake Eyes a katana. That makes sense, because that's a non-lethal capture sort of weapon. Well, I guess he could be alive. You could just lop off his arms and legs. But I thought
it was
that
a
was
black
really weird
katana too, right?
Yeah, I guess
thing.
maybe it was filled with magic knockout juice or something. And anyway, so I had all of that. Then we cut back to one of the other plots. Which one? Who the fuck knows? But it's not the ninja one, because they're back over in fucking Mountain Town. So we go back over to where we're in Washington, D.C., and the plan now is for Lady J to covertly infiltrate a benefit, a political benefit, to get close to the president, who they now suspect is someone posing as the president, so that she can get some form of DNA sample from the president to determine who the fuck this guy actually is. So I have Lady J going in without a disguise to get a DNA sample from the president. Makes no sense, because exactly what you think would happen. They end up, the Cobra operators who are working behind the scenes, they have all the security cameras looking on. They suspect Lady J when she shows up, and she uses a pseudonym to get in.
Isn't her cover? I'm pretty sure one of the agents, as her cover, says, "Oh, Chief of Staff."
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that any Secret Service
what
agent
happened
should
is
probably know what the Chief of Staff looks like.
I think the dude that, all right, so earlier the Joes intercept a guy, and I thought the guy they intercepted was supposed to be the Chief of Staff. The dude that they drugged and then forced to.
Right. Oh, were they trying to say he was that's who invited him?
Right, she was the guest
that
of
was
the Chief of Staff.
Not clear. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I think is supposed to have happened. So yeah, the Joes end up kidnapping, and not just an American citizen, but the Chief of Staff of the United States. Drug him so that he will forget everything they're about to do to him, then threaten him to make sure he calls in and invites Lady J under a pseudonym to attend this benefit. The Cobra officers are using facial recognition software, and they figure out that Lady J is in fact a G.I. Joe and not who she claims to be. It actually takes way longer than facial recognition software actually takes, as anyone who has ever used anything with facial recognition software can tell you. Like, it takes as long as the plot conveniently needs it to. And then there's a super stupid, cheap-ass editing trick that they use that I found insulting, and it's a common one, and I hate it every single time I see it, no matter who uses it. And it's where you have the bad guys. They figured out the good guy, undercover person is actually a good guy. They're ready to go after. They're closing in. And the way the editing works, it looks like the bad guys are just about to sweep in and grab the good guy. But then, in fact, once they get there, you find out the moment that you were sure was the good guy, in a compromising position or whatever, is actually something totally different, and the good guy has already escaped. Because the shot is Lady J is dancing with the president, or who everyone thinks is the president. It's actually Zartan in disguise. So Lady J is dancing with him. He's got her. He's not letting her go because he's playing the part of this pervy old president guy. And not that the president in the movie, like not that the actual president in the movie is that pervy, but apparently Zartan is. And so he's got hold of Lady J and he's dancing with her and he's not letting her get anywhere. The bad guys are closing in, but when they get into the room, they see the president's just kind of shaking hands with somebody else, and Lady J is nowhere to be seen. So it's this cheap-ass editing trick to make you think that she's going to have this situation where she's going to be completely surrounded by enemies and she has to figure out her way out. But in truth, she's actually already left the room. And it's playing with timing in a way that doesn't actually work, because it tells you that the sequence you're watching within the scene does not actually match up with the real-time unfolding of events. And I hate that in movies. I think that that's the cheapest way to get a character out of a sticky situation, is for this reveal that they've already managed to get out by the time the bad guy gets there, because it tells you that the last few sequences you've been watching have not been unfolding in real time, because there's no way it would have worked in real time. But yeah, that's a complaint I have about movies that just use that trick, not just G.I. Joe Retaliation. I honestly hated this movie already, so this was just another nail in the coffin. All right, so then I've got Firefly, who, according to one thing I read, was a former G.I. Joe, but he turns Cobra. Not that that's ever mentioned in the movie, so as far as I can tell in the movie, he's just a Cobra operative. Firefly, who's the demolitions kind of expert, and he has all these little robotic fireflies that have an amazing amount of explosives packed into a tiny, tiny package. He says Firefly must be the ultimate badass, since he can be hit by a car traveling at what looked to be about 70 miles per hour and not only survive, but still escape on a motorcycle. He's standing there, he's about to shoot Roadblock in the head, and then Flint runs him down with like an SUV traveling at 70 miles per hour. The Firefly flies up into the air from the collision, lands behind the SUV, and then manages to get up and shuffle off and get on his motorcycle and drive away. And not only that, in the next scene, he's okay. He's walking around. He doesn't look bruised. I thought that was pretty phenomenal.
Well, they actually, wait a second. I'm having world logic.
Ayaz, you're coming in like a robot. You were sounding like Cobra Commander there.
I should be fixing that. Okay, so I've probably fixed that now.
Yeah, that's better.
Got it.
All right, what were you going to say?
Okay, yeah. So the logic that I'm going to inject into this idea that Firefly is okay is the same nanomite technology they used on Storm Shadow, who was badly burned in one of the first scenes, or in the escape scene. So in somewhere, Cobra's got some technology to fix things based on these nanomites. Possible with Firefly? Was there any time for that?
I mean,
he was on the ground after getting hit by the car. I don't really think so.
I think even if you had the nanomites in you, if you're hit by a car, which all right, let's just say it's an SUV. So conservatively, I'll say 5,000 pounds, traveling at 70 miles per hour. Let's work out the momentum here. Okay, get your sheets of paper out. If an SUV weighing 5,000 pounds strikes a stationary target, man-sized, man density, man weight, at 70 miles per hour, you get man yogurt. That's the scientific result of that equation. He was not man yogurt. He bounced up into the air, landed on the ground, flat on the ground, and you could tell he was hurt. He barely manages to shuffle out and get on his motorcycle to get away, and then he's fine. And then later on, he gets killed anyway, so spoiler alert. Back to the Storm Shadow plot, according to my notes. If Zartan... So yeah, it's revealed that the whole reason why there's this Snake Eyes Storm Shadow rift is that Snake Eyes had been brought into the Hard Master is the name of the character. The Hard Master's dojo, and he had been adopted essentially by the Hard Master, and turned into the Hard Master's favorite pupil. And Storm Shadow was jealous as a result, and Storm Shadow runs away. Then everyone assumes that Storm Shadow assassinated the Hard Master. That's kind of how it's indicated. But it's revealed that Storm Shadow did no such thing. He did not actually kill his former master. Everyone thinks he did, but in truth, it turns out it was actually Zartan in disguise killing the the master in order to tempt Storm Shadow to the dark side and train him as a evil agent. Keep in mind, this is years before any Cobra Commander has come to rise. It's, if you watch the first movie, you know the Doctor ends up being turned into Cobra Commander. This is years before any of that takes place. It also made me wonder just how the fuck old is Zartan, because he looked like he was the same age in the reveal in the flashback as he was in the movie at present. And at least 20 years had to have taken place between the two. So that was a little crazy.
Yeah, I was kind of confused by that too. The flashback to them being about, 8 years old.
Yeah.
And then he's the exact same age.
Yeah. And then I said...
Sorry, the other thing that to be mentioned is Zartan, in theory, is played by Arnold Vosloo, who played the Mummy in the Mummy movies. And I'm looking at the trivia right now. His face is only seen for roughly 3 seconds. So I don't know if Vosloo is like top billed at all in this movie, but if you're expecting to see him, you don't see him very often because it's just played by the guy who I think used to be in those Infinity commercials with the marble. Yeah. The ball bearing, that is. I think that's who the president is in this movie.
It's Jonathan Pryce who plays the president. Yeah. He's also in Adventures of Baron Munchausen. He's in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as the governor character. So yeah, he's done lots of stuff. Now my next note is this movie should have been titled "How Firefly Escapes Certain Death 54 fucking times," because every time you think this guy's gonna die, he gets away, with the exception of the very last one. So, escape attempt number 55 does not work out for him. But the previous 54 times, he's aces. So why even have... Okay, so in the movie, what happens is that you find out there's going to be this big nuclear disarmament summit where all the world's leaders are invited to come to Washington, D.C. and have this discussion about disarming nuclear weapons. And it turns out it's all a pretense for the Zartan as the president to lure them there and coerce them into launching their nuclear weapons. He first launches a nuclear strike using a briefcase that has the button, and then all the world leaders happen to have their briefcases that will also launch their nuclear weapons, and so they all launch them in response. Then he detonates Zartan detonates the U.S.'s nuclear warheads, leaving the rest of the world responsible for the destruction of the Earth if they allow it to continue, pressuring them to all detonate their warheads. And thus, he says, the world has been disarmed of nuclear weapons. This, of course, presumes that any nuclear strike would involve every country launching the sum total of all nuclear weapons they have at their disposal, and then self-destructing all of them. By the way, that's not how stuff works. You like that?
Nicely done, sir. Nicely
thank
done.
you. But yeah, so that was a really crazy moment. But okay, cartoon logic. Let's just say that's what they were going with. And then Zartan reveals the real plan and pulls out another suitcase that has a cobra emblazoned on it instead of a nation's flag. And this one has the system that Cobra has created that I can't remember what they called it. It was Mars in the first movie.
Well, they called it Zeus.
That makes sense. It was Mars in the first movie, Zeus in the second movie. The idea being that they're actually using kinetic energy to destroy cities, not with a nuclear blast, but just a pure kinetic blast by launching tungsten rods from space and letting gravity do all the work, which
totally works. Totally.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Thank goodness there's no such thing as terminal velocity to
mitigate
such a factor.
That tungsten was traveling at what was it, like 20 times the speed of a bullet when it hit the ground or something like that?
Yeah. 200 times or something.
200 times, yeah.
So anyway,
I was hoping they'd get more complicated because what you just said is the actual. There's a tungsten rod. We're going to drop it from space, And I'm like, okay, is it going to meet something and it's going to create an explosion other than the ground? Is it going to get passed through some kind of material so that it becomes a huge weaponized thing that through some kind of, it's going to pass through a tube of nanomites and it'll change as it lands? They don't explain anything close to that. It's literally, we're dropping this from really high.
Yeah. You know what happens when you drop a penny from the Empire State Building? Well, we've done one better. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and they destroy London that way. They absolutely destroy London that way, which is fair. They destroyed Paris in the first one, so yeah. So you've got this thing, but my question is, why would you even have a remote operated satellite kill system? Why wouldn't you just leave the control system in the super secret base where there's no threat of anyone getting at it? Instead, you have it on a fucking briefcase, which means if someone gets hold of that briefcase, they could either prematurely launch the system or disable it. And they don't have any fail safes or firing mechanisms in any of the super secret base. They have plenty of people monitoring it because they're constantly saying, we're 5 minutes from drop, 4 minutes from drop. So they have one briefcase that's the master control for the system, and Roadblock, with literally no time left, as the last second is counting down, shuts down the system, which causes all the satellites to self-destruct and destroy Cobra's intricate plan. That's a terrible plan. Horrible fail-safes there. You would think that you would be able to, again, switch control over to a stationary control system and not have to worry about a briefcase floating around that could completely ruin your plans of world domination. Cobra Commander, if you need a consultant, I am here, because you clearly did not think this through. So, just saying. Cobra Commander gets away. Firefly gets blown up by one of his own Fireflies. Haha, there's irony for you. Zartan is killed by Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow kills him as retaliation for killing the Hard Master and blaming it on Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow then walks off, presumably to resume his life of being a ninja for hire, I guess. So you've got Cobra Commander and Storm Shadow still alive at the end of the movie. Destro's still captured in a prison somewhere. And that's about it. Oh, and then you get the very end of the movie. I didn't even mention Bruce Willis is in this movie. Bruce Willis is in it as the original G.I. Joe, and ends up having an entire fucking arsenal in his house, which the other Joe characters end up borrowing from liberally so that they can do this rescue mission to try and stop Cobra Commander's plan. No one seems particularly surprised about Cobra Commander either. I guess maybe the jailbreak must have gotten some sort of press coverage, because no one seems surprised for him to show up. It's just a really weird fucking movie. And like I said, you don't care about anybody because there's no reason to. The closest they try to get is they give Lady J her little, hack.
Her backstory with her father. Yeah.
Yeah. She's third generation military, and her father wanted to have a son so there could be she's fourth generation. Her father wanted a son so that he could carry on the line, but he had a daughter instead, and apparently refused to acknowledge any sort of female being capable of being a soldier, and so that she had wanted to be able to rise up in rank high enough so that he would be forced to salute her, just so he would have to acknowledge the fact that she had worked her ass off and become a soldier, but he died before that could happen. So at the very end of the movie, Bruce Willis's character, who has, I guess, in the eyes of the film, if not the audience, become a father figure to Lady J, salutes her, and that's supposed to be the resolution of that character arc. But again, since you don't give a flying fuck about either Bruce Willis's character or Lady J, it doesn't matter. So, do you guys think I summed it up pretty well? That's all my notes.
That was definitely every point in the movie that I can think of. So, the one note that I did have was right after they get bombed and all the Joes are assumed dead, and it's announced that they're all now dead. is wouldn't you confirm the bodies? Shoddy work by Cobra, really rookie stuff here.
Yeah. Cobra just showed a lack of follow through all the way throughout the movie. I mean, they have ambition, but no follow through. You really need to learn from your past mistakes, Cobra. Seriously, hire me on as a consultant. I will help you out with this. So
wait a second. They did find out that 3 Joes were alive. They had them figured out, and they were saying that there was traces of them communicating. So they did look that up.
But it took way too much time to figure that out. Also, how could they have confirmed that? Because we saw that what's his name had all of the dog tags for all of the Joes that had died.
Yeah, which makes you wonder. Like you would think that Cobra would show up at the site, to finally comb over it and make sure that everyone's dead, and then think, wow, the Joes sure are a weird military unit. None of them are wearing dog tags. It's almost as if someone has methodically gone through and removed every single dog tag from every single corpse. I mean, it's weird because, again, you've got a movie where the only reason you would care about these characters is that you already know who they are, right? You cannot go into this movie never knowing who these characters are and expect to care about them. You have to care about them based upon the fact that you were a fan of some other incarnation of G.I. Joe, because there's not enough in the movie to make you care, right? But then at the same time, they kill off everyone but 3 fucking members of G.I. Joe. So if you are supposed to care, why would you be anything other than amazingly pissed at this movie? This would be like starting off a Transformers movie and killing off all the fucking Autobots except 3 minor characters who really never featured heavily in any storyline. Like that's the equivalent. I don't get this movie. I don't get the structure of it. I don't get the how it was supposed to appeal to an audience, whether that audience was G.I. Joe fans or complete newbies, because it doesn't do a good job at servicing either group. It's like the shittiest approach to either way. I mean, because
I'm looking at Rotten Tomatoes right now. I put in G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Because I thought this was better than the first one, and nobody agrees with me at Rotten Tomato. It's 35%, I guess, fresh for G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra, 28% for G.I. Joe Retaliation. But get this, the 1986 animated movie G.I. Joe, the movie, 43% fresh. So perhaps we should be watching that for a cohesive, structured movie about G.I. Joe if we so choose to continue this military style of movie.
Well, see, here's the thing that really, to get back to the whole idea of, it's a terrible approach to trying to either appeal to a brand new audience or to G.I. Joe fans. Take a look at what Marvel's done with their superhero movies. They've done a pretty good job of appealing to hardcore fans with enough little references to minor obscure characters to keep them happy, and still also please a general audience that might be aware of these comic book characters, but certainly haven't necessarily followed them in any way. I mean, I haven't read Avengers comics, really. I might have read a few, but not very many. Never like a full arc or anything. So it's something that's completely doable. I mean, it's something that we've seen happen recently, and it's just that it's funny that Marvel has managed to do that right more often than not, or at least as often as not, depending upon your view of the various Marvel films. But G.I. Joe just got it completely wrong. I'd say that Transformers equally got it completely wrong.
You know what? I think I know why I think this movie was better. It's the runtime.
Why is that?
It's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes shorter. It's only an hour and a half versus an hour and 58 minutes for the first one. That's probably what did it, because if you have a shitty story, if you get it done quick enough, I'm not as irritated. It's like the whole idea behind Vine, right? 6 seconds of video. You watched something that was shitty, it was 6 seconds. An hour and a half action movie, that's about standard. When you get to 2 hours, you better have a good fucking movie. Because if you're getting past an hour and a half, you better have something solid. And we've seen a lot of shitty films that at like 1:45, you're like, this movie needs to end now.
I gotta say, Ayaz, you're making me nervous because the longer this podcast goes, the more I think we need to actually make it a good one.
So we haven't gotten to an hour 45 yet. That's the point. When the people listen to this at hour 45, they will be terrified to know that this thing ended at 1 hour and 37 minutes.
One thing that I was glad about, though, was that this movie gave us, or at least it gave me, plenty to talk about because there were lots of things to point out about inconsistencies. Whereas some of the other movies we've watched recently were just either so dull or so horrifyingly awful that really you couldn't say much other than, please, no more movies with rape in them.
Right, Doom Generation.
Yeah.
That one was really, really a downer.
Yeah. Eric, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, wait, isn't it my pick again? Because now I'm afraid.
I think it is your pick again because you picked Doom Generation, then Ayaz picked How to Be a Man, then I picked G.I. Joe Retaliation, so it's your turn.
So we got to find out.
Cockneys versus Zombies. Has anybody seen it?
What?
I have not.
I don't
Cockneys
even know
versus
of it.
Zombies.
Cockneys versus Zombies. 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. Might not be horrible.
I'm about to.
Cockneys versus Zombies. All right.
Cockneys, as in.
And I have a 3 1/3 star. 3.2. Yeah.
2.9 for me.
2.7 for me. So, all right, it's going in the list.
Sweet.
I do have another one in the list. Hansel and Gretel get stoned. I've got that one waiting for my next turn. I haven't watched any of the Hansel and Gretel, like the various Hansel and Gretel movies that all came out at the same time. You know, the ones that tried to take advantage of the I guess it's not a big budget, but medium budget film. Who did it have in it? Like Hawkeye from the Avengers, whatever. Yeah. I haven't watched that one yet either, but I had heard that that Hansel and Gretel Get Stoned was something I should check out. So that's what I'll be picking for my next turn, unless you pick it and deny me that pleasure. So just letting you know.
I'll go find another. What's his name? Uwe Boll.
Yeah.
Movie.
Not another. Are we gonna try and watch Blubberella a second time?
Blubberella.
I don't.
Maybe not this guy's name right anymore.
I don't think
Blubberella's even there anymore.
I don't think any of us got past I don't think any of us got past 10 minutes of Blubberella. But the star
Blubberella
of the movie
is no longer available.
Okay. The star of the movie did tweet us after we covered the film on the podcast.
Okay, so there's a number of Uwe Boll movies, including one starring Dolph Lundgren, who played at one point He-Man in Masters of the Universe, called "In the Name of the King 2."
He did a Jason Statham movie.
What? Uwe Boll?
In the Name of the King, apparently. Yeah.
Jason Statham is in that too?
Yeah.
Was it In the Name of the King 2?
Right. The first one's Jason Statham. The second one is not Jason Statham.
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah.
So it's like an Expendables, like they're just going to rotate through the Expendables cast list.
Yeah.
So the third one will have.
You're right. I totally I was completely wrong about this. I didn't look at the second row. In the Name of the King and In the Name of the King 2 is both Uwe Boll. There's Statham, and wow, this is how does he do this? 1.5 stars, 1.5 stars, 1.5 stars, everything. Zombie Massacre.
Well,
by the way, there's a great Chrome extension that'll give you Rotten Tomatoes right in Netflix in the rollover.
Oh, awesome! I'll have to add that.
Awesome. It's called Netflix Rate.
So for all of our listeners out there, assuming this episode goes up live at some point, Cockneys versus Zombies, next movie. If you want to try and watch along, write down how long you were able to watch the movie without any distractions, no alcohol, nothing like that. Just you and the movie. No notifications, nothing. Write down how long you made it, and you too can torture your psyche like the poor bastards who host this show.
Now, if you had to pair G.I. Joe Retaliation with food,
oh, good
what
question.
Food would it be?
Let's see. I'm gonna go with like a bag of Hydrox cookies because they haven't been on the market since 2003. So you found a bag that somehow has been overlooked for, more than a decade. It's not going to be satisfying or taste anything like what you had hoped it would taste like, but it's a perfect accompaniment for this movie.
I honestly don't think I can do better than that. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that Jonathan must have found a box of Hydrox cookies.
I just noticed that recently on Facebook, people have been posting "Bring back Hydrox cookies." And I'm thinking those have been off the market for more than a decade. Why is this coming around now?
They weren't even very good. Like what?
Some people say that they were crispier and less sweet than Oreos, and therefore a better cookie. Because apparently less sweet is something you want in a cookie. I don't know. I just know that I've seen it pop up a couple of times recently, as of this week, and I thought that's odd because I know that those haven't been produced for years. So, but that's why I would pair it with the movie. What about you, Ayaz? Do you have a different pairing you would make with G.I. Joe Retaliation?
I mean, you really had a very compelling argument for why you picked Hydrox cookies and how that would work. I'm just trying to think how did I find this movie to be, I think the point you made earlier about my haptic feedback experience. Thankfully, I had the haptic feedback experience on the bus. So I need to find a food that gives you that same rumbly feeling so that you can enjoy the movie like I did. So perhaps have an incredibly overly spicy chili or lots of Taco Bell food so you can kind of just feel a little weird while you're watching the movie. Maybe that'll help your experience.
So 8 Taco Bell bean burritos goes great with G.I. Joe Retaliation.
Yeah, I mean it's just as nutritious for your brain.
The nice thing is that'll only set you back $3.73.
Or like, wait a minute, maybe it should be a very expensive food that doesn't have a lot of payoff. You're like, why did it cost $120 million? This is I don't know. But
so this would be the food equivalent. The food equivalent of that smartphone app that just put a little jewel icon on your phone.
The I Am Rich app, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should look into the future.
Next week on Podcast Without Pretense.
And that's the last time Ayaz will ever drink white wine while on the podcast.
Cockneys, zombies, I couldn't tell what the fuck was going on. They were both so fucking pale.
This weekend I marathoned every U Bowl movie so we can not watch it for this podcast.